Hey there guys, this is your host Richard with another marvelous video. The greatest time-traveling mutant in the looping, paradoxical continuity of Marvel's X-Men. An agonized man, fiercely protective of his own kind and reality. Nathan Summers, better known as Cable, has been on quite a journey since the creation of his character. Since his birth, Cable's life has been dictated by a series of tragic events. His mother nearly sacrificed him for her own benefit. He was injected with a life-threatening virus that tortured him till the end, and one of his greatest enemies was his own clone. In this marvelous video, we're going to take a deep dive into Cable's life. We'll begin our exploration of his creation, how he became a skilled warrior, all his selves from alternate realities, and his features in the MCU. Let's find out who shot Old Man Cable in the face without an ounce of mercy. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Nathan Christopher Charles Summers' early years, the origin story. We start where most stories start, the creation of his character. A time traveler from the future was created by Rob Liefeld and made his first appearance as an adult in the New Mutants number 87 in 1990. Here, he was just known as a mysterious mutant with cyborg parts who was the leader of the New Mutants. The infant sons of Madeline Pryor and Scott Summers, whose character was created by Chris Claremont, also existed. Baby Nathan made his first appearance in the Uncanny X-Men number 201 in 1986. This infant was sent 2,000 years into the future, and many speculated that he'd be Cable until this was confirmed in future storylines. The question remained, how did Cable's origin story fit into the whole continuity? To understand this, we have to look into his parents' story briefly. During the initial run of the X-Men in the 60s, Jean Grey was portrayed to be an insignificant character. She was often powerless and a damsel in distress. Could you imagine? She made a revamped comeback in the giant-sized X-Men number 1. Chris Claremont intended for Jean to be a hit with the readers. She came to be known as one of the most potent telepaths to exist and a fierce host of the Phoenix Force. The evil genius Mr. Sinister was obsessed with Jean and Scott. He believed that their mutant child would be powerful enough to defeat Apocalypse. By this point in the timeline, Jean Grey was dead. So, Mr. Sinister created Jean's clone, Madeline Pryor. Madeline and Scott met. The red-headed woman reminded Cyclops of his dead lover, and he fell in love at first sight. Madeline and Scott got married and eventually had a child named Nathan Christopher Charles Summers. For the first few months of his life, Nathan was raised in Anchorage, Alaska. The Summers seemed to be a typical family until the resurrection of Jean Grey. When Scott realized that his soulmate had come back to life, he abandoned his wife and son. While Scott, Jean, and the other X-Men were busy creating the X-Factor team, Nathan was abducted by Mr. Sinister's marauders. The villain also tried to kill Madeline to prevent his plan from being exposed, but she survived. Nathan's mother sought help from the X-Men, while his father believed that she'd moved away. Mr. Sinister got to work, experimenting on the baby as he erased all of the memories that he had of his parents. The clairvoyant mutant Destiny informed Scott that his son was being held in Sinister's orphanage in Nebraska. The evil scientist also captured Madeline Pryor and exposed her true origins, which caused her to lose her mind completely. This also proved to be the moment where her latent telepathic and telekinetic powers manifested. Madeline donned the alias of the Goblin Queen. She also lost all sight of what truly mattered and proceeded to make a significant deal with the demon named Nastir. The Goblin Queen wished to use her own baby as a means to an end. She agreed to sacrifice Nathan in order to open a portal between Earth and Limbo. But Nathan was rescued just in time by Scott, accompanied by Jean and the rest of the X-Men. Since this near sacrifice, Baby Nathan was looked after by Jean and Scott. Baby Nathan's mutant powers began manifesting as he'd form a protective shield every time he instinctively felt threatened. Nathan's half-sister, Rachel Summers, was from an alternate reality. She realized that they psionically bonded. Rachel vowed to protect him if he needed her. All seemed well until another tragedy struck. The supervillain Apocalypse had realized Mr. Sinister's plans. How would this play out for the infant? Apocalypse discreetly kidnapped the child and took him to the Inhumans lunar base. There, he injected Nathan with the deadly techno-organic virus. He did this to determine if Nathan was strong enough to survive being infected. If he survived, he'd be deemed worthy enough to become a host for Apocalypse. The virus rapidly spread through Nathan's body and threatened to transform his entire anatomy into liquid organic steel. The X-Men and X-Factor reached a moment too late as the virus was already coursing through Nathan. A woman magically walked through a portal and claimed to know a potential cure. This was Ascani, who was part of a special sisterhood in the future. They were known to fight against Apocalypse's course. Ascani gave Nathan's panicked father a much-needed solution. She told him that the only way Nathan would survive the TO virus was if he were to be sent 2,000 years into the future. He'd be watched over by the X-Factor's sentient computer, SHIP, which was originally created by the Celestials. This sentient computer was nearly destroyed by the TO virus and remained dormant in baby Nathan's chest. It was revealed that in the time period the Ascani came from, Nathan was a radical savior who went by the name Cable. Ascani and her sisterhood promised to cure him of his ailment. Cable, Genesis of a Warrior, the birth and rise of Nathan Summers. Cable wasn't always the stoic warrior that we know him as today. He was like any other teenager once, angry, confused, yet owning remarkable courage. It's still a melancholic tale. The poor guy can't seem to catch a break. But things started looking up for him the moment he took matters into his own hands and fought for a cause. Defeating Apocalypse as a teenager. As soon as they arrived in the future, Askani placed Nathan into an incubation crib. She also cloned him as a precautionary measure in case Nathan succumbed to the techno-organic virus. There was also a possibility of him being unable to survive their treatment. Just then, the Askani sisterhood was attacked, and Chevere nearly succeeded in bringing Nathan to Apocalypse. It was also revealed that Askani was actually a time-displaced Rachel Summers. In order to protect Nathan, she projected the psyches of Scott Summers and Jean Grey from their timeline into the future. They inhabited the bodies of their descendants and went by the names of Red and Slim Dayspring. Nathan had no idea that Scott was his biological father, brought from the past. Red and Slim took care of Nathan for 12 whole years, while the Askani sisterhood defended themselves against Apocalypse's relentless attacks. One day, Nathan decided to walk into the lion's den. He bravely snuck into Apocalypse's laboratory and met himself. Well, his evil clone, Strife, who was brainwashed by Apocalypse. The two came face to face and stared at each other in confusion. With some quick thinking, Nathan stunned his evil clone with a psionic blast. When puberty came, Nathan struggled to gain control of his powers. He nearly died trying to suppress the spreading techno-organic virus. But Mother Askani, aka Rachel Summers, reached out to him from the astral plane. He was advised to utilize the powers inherited from his mother. Cable realized that using his telekinetic abilities kept his techno-organic virus in check. Nathan realized that his mother, Red, was in trouble with his abilities and rushed to help her with Slim. The sight before him was a captured Red and Apocalypse about to merge with Strife's body. If the merge happened, it would have had cataclysmic consequences. Nathan destroyed the link between the two villains just in time, which killed Apocalypse. Cable was no longer in need of constant protection, which meant Red and Slim were able to go back to their present reality as Jean and Scott. Sadly, Mother Askani had significantly been weakened from fighting off Apocalypse's forces over these great long years. She had just enough energy to send Slim and Red back before she succumbed to her fatigue and died. Cable was now safe, but genuinely and completely alone. Starting a family to lose them. Years later, Cable encountered Blacksmith, who was known to be a mysterious telepath. The telepath urged Nathan to rediscover the Askani and learn their ways to hone his powers better. On his way to Ebonshire, Cable stumbled across a pirate ship under attack. He sought to rescue the last survivor, but was overpowered by the ancient aquatic beast named Dagon. He nearly died again, but was rescued by a woman named Alia, who used the scimitar scythe to slay the beast. As they made their way to the shelter, they were attacked by creepy insectoid creatures, but Nathan, an impressive display of strength, wielded Alia's scimitar and defeated the monsters. A spark was ignited between them. Alia finally led him to Madame's sanctity. She was the leader of an underground clan of the Askani, but as Blacksmith predicted, Madame wasn't the Askani Nathan was fated to meet, it was Alia. She taught Nathan the ways of the Askani, which was unheard of since they only accepted women in their clan. He was chosen to be the Askani's son, or the one who was meant to defeat the Canaanites. The Canaanites were the regime that replaced Apocalypse's empire. Even though he was dead, his evil ideas lived on. As his fight against the group took shape, he swore to destroy all regimes that sought to oppress a specific group or community of people. A long war between the Askani, New Canaanites, and Strife's armies began. Trained in the ways of the Askani, Cable found the clan Chosen, a group of fierce freedom fighters. There was a moment when Nathan nearly succumbed to a mysterious illness but was telepathically healed by his future self. He bravely led his forces in battle against the Canaanites and won several times. Alia and Nathan had been to hell and back together. They were madly in love and celebrated this love by getting married. They started a family and had a child named Tyler. The fighting still continued, and unbeknownst to him, unimaginable heartbreak awaited Cable. During one of these battles, Nathan and the clan Chosen were made to believe that an attack was taking place nearby, led by the Canaanites in a location far from their battle camp. Nathan left in a hurry, but Alia, with baby Tyler in her arms, stayed back at the camp. Alas, this was simply a diversion, and before he could draw his next breath, the battle camp was bombed. Nathan rushed to find his wife drowned in the debris, with Tyler nowhere to be seen. As she lay dying in his arms, it was revealed that Strife was responsible for the assault and he'd taken their son. A broken Nathan still continued his search for his son, but realized deep down what Strife would do to him. Just as Apocalypse had done to him, Strife brainwashed Tyler into doing his bidding. Strife used the deranged mutant Frisco, who possessed the ability to alter other people's personalities. In one of Cable's various encounters with his evil clone, he met his son. Such a pity that Tyler was never given the chance to grow into his own person. He was mentally altered to hate his own blood and stood before his father, wishing to kill him. In their confrontation, Tyler linked his mind with one of Clan Chosen's teammates, Dawnsilk, which put Nathan in an impossible Cable's spot. But when it came to it, Nathan was forced to shoot his own son, something Tyler would hold against his father for many years to come. Meanwhile, Strife fled into the past like a coward. Back to the present and into the Wild Pack. Naturally, Nathan had a bone to pick with his evil clone. He followed Strife into the past. He'd hoped to land somewhere near Xavier's school, but ended up in Scotland, where he met Moira McTaggart for the first time. She directed him to New York City. Soon, Cable familiarized himself with the Big Apple of the 20th century. He came across the Vulture carrying out his first ever bank heist. Cable met Franklin Rhodes, an officer forever changed by war, and the two became buddies pretty soon. Meanwhile, Wolverine had just wrapped up the capture of Devon Cray, a Canaanite who had traveled back in time to capture Cable. He managed to escape Logan and confronted Cable, who won the fight but lost his friend Rhodes in the crossfire. Logan was apathetic towards the loss of Cable's friend, which sparked an aloof rivalry between the men for many years to come. Settled into the 20th century, Cable founded the mercenary group known as the Wild Pack, but this name was changed to Six Pack when Silver Sable told him that a Wild Pack already existed. The team also included future X-Force member Domino. The Six Pack went on missions like infiltrating a Hydra base for a paycheck from AIM. The base was about to self-detonate when Cable slid himself and his team to safety. During his time with the Six Pack, Cable momentarily went back into the future to gain more intel on a group known as the Externals. The Externals were known to be immortal and crucial for Apocalypse's rise to power. The record showed the name Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball. He lived in the 24th century and soon would realize that he was indeed an External. Cable took great interest in this as Sam stepping into his role as High Lord could stop Genesis from ascending. The Six Pack neared their messy decimation when they took up a perilous mission for Tolliver. The team stumbled right into a Strife operation, but realized they were unprepared. Cable led the team on yet another mission to track down Strife, but things went south when one of the team members, Garrison Kane, was taken hostage. At that moment, Cable decided to throw Kane under the bus for the sake of his mission, abandon his team and body slide out of danger all by himself. He essentially abandoned the Six Pack and went solo. Defending Madripoor with the New Mutants, Cable found himself all alone once again. He ran headfirst into the prickly Freedom Force, who nearly killed him. Thanks to his luck, the team of New Mutants happened to be nearby and helped him fight off the government-sanctioned freaks. Cable accompanied the New Mutants to their school and met Moira McTaggart for the second time. Both Moira and Cable observed that the New Mutants could really do with a new leader and mentor. The New Mutants, also known as the X-Babies, were former students of Xavier's school and needed guidance. Moira was a bit apprehensive, since she knew Cable's leadership was often very militaristic. One of the students, Richter, hated the fact that Cable was their leader, so they decided to stir up trouble in the form of rebellion. He went into the Morlock tunnels by himself, which prompted Cable to lead the rest of the team on the first militaristic rescue mission. During the Days of the Future Present storyline, the New Mutants paired up with the Fantastic Four to fight off the evil geneticist Ahab. This whole fiasco dripped with irony as Cable essentially saved himself. How? Well, he fought to rescue Cyclops' son, who was abducted. This meant that he saved his past self so he could exist in the present. Remember that Cable was in the dark about his lineage and the truth about his parents. Following this, Cable led the New Mutants into Madripoor, where they learned of the Mutant Liberation Front, led by Strife. His evil clone planned to drug the drinking water resources of significant cities until the demands were met. Cable, helped by Sunfire, led their team into a battle against the MLF. Cable headed the troops on land, while Sunfire commanded mutants who took to the skies. Cable also butt heads with Wolverine, an old rival, but Richter made the two men realize that they shared a familiar foe. Who knew Wolverine and Cable could make such a dynamic duo? In an awesome fight sequence, the team of New Mutants planted explosions in the drug warehouses of the MLF and walked away unscathed, but so did the villains. End of an era in his glowing eye. During the Extinction Agenda story arc, the New Mutants, X-Men, and X-Factor found themselves teamed up against the cyborg named Cameron Hodge. By now, Cable was officially classified as a mutant, which made the left eye glow. In this storyline, Cable is shown to be gruff and on edge at all times while also maintaining a level of care and kindness to the young mutants. He was injured when the Genosian magistrates attacked the teams, but Storm quickly stepped in to hide the experienced mutants in an underground bunker of the X-Mansion. When Wolfsbane assimilated into a mutate, Cable handled this fact poorly. He'd insisted that Moira leave the young mutant under his care, and now believed that he'd failed. His sorrow deepened when one of his team members, Warlock, was killed in battle. In the final encounter with Cameron Hodge on Genosha, Cable wasn't in his right senses and got beaten up. When the Genosian Citadel was attacked, Cable gained a newfound respect for the mutants and their enduring might. He experienced firsthand how mutant kind fought relentlessly to persevere. After Hodge was defeated, Cable took the remaining New Mutants back to the X-Mansion and began looking for new recruits. He mourned the death of Warlock and missed Wolfsbane, who had decided to stay back in Genosha. Everyone's favorite merc with a mouth showed up, claiming that Tolliver had put a bounty on Cable's head. The two fought for the first time, and Deadpool was sent back to Tolliver with a face of defeat. A few core members of the New Mutants, like Richter and Sunspot, left the team, which led Cable to recruit more cutthroat mutants for his cause. The new members were like Warpath, Shatterstar, Domino, and Feral. The first mission the fresh team of New Mutants went on was during the Kings of Pain storyline, when two ill-intentioned mutants began sucking the energy from the Earth. The New Mutants met with the New Warriors for the first time. They were a team of super teens formed by Night Thrasher. It turned out that the reason energy was being sucked from Earth was to revive Moira's son, Proteus. This was a moment of major conflict between father and son. Cyclops nearly convinced Proteus to kill himself since it would contribute to a greater purpose, but Cable was completely against it. The ongoing war against the mutants deeply affected the New Mutants. It changed them. They went from naive mutant youths to hardened warriors desensitized to death and violence. Birth of the X-Force and a run-in with Tolliver. At some point in the timeline, the New Mutants became the X-Force. The newly knighted X-Force tried to take on Strife's forces but failed miserably. A few members sustained injuries, which prompted Cable to make the team undergo extensive training. One session consisted of a game of hide-and-seek where Feral hid while the other members had to seek her. This went horribly as Feral went, feral and tore through Cannonball's stomach. The training was put to the test when they took up a shelved mission. In a mission that no other superhero team was willing to take up, Juggernaut and Black Tom conspired to bomb the World Trade Center. This mission went amiss as Cable and his team were unable to stop the villains in time. With the top of the World Trade Center destroyed, Cable sent his team to search for survivors. He cornered Black Tom, the villain who cowardly tried to make a deal with Cable, a trick that would have worked on, say, Captain America or Storm, but not Cable, who completely disregarded the option of leaving Tom alive and pumped him with everything his gun was loaded with. No rest for the wicked and no respite for the vigilantes, as soon after, the Morlocks and the Brotherhood of Evil mutants attacked the X-Force where they lived. Sauron was said to have killed Cannonball, but Cable isn't seen mourning his teammate's death. In his eyes, Cannonball's death meant that his ascension to a High Lord was near. Sure enough, Sam came back to life, but the High Lord storyline never saw its end as the whole concept of the externals was scrapped. Cable always looked out for his team. When Shatterstar accidentally fell into a random wormhole, Cable led his team to rescue him. They landed in an alternate world and stumbled right into the Warheads. The world they found themselves in strangely increased their bloodlust. The result was violent duels to death with a bunch of jumbo cats. As virile as Cable usually was, he felt an unnatural amount of testosterone pumping through him, and it messed with his rational mind. But with the whole team's effort, the X-Force escaped this maddening dimension. Back at the X-Force base, Deadpool snuck in to meet his girlfriend. Deadpool's girlfriend, Copycat, had been posing as Domino for who knows how long. Cable discovered that Copycat cosplaying as Domino was working for Tolliver all along. He forced Copycat to lead him to Tolliver, but before they could leave, the X-Force was attacked by Weapon Prime, a team assembled by Garrison Kane. They barely managed to transport away, but Cable was still separated from his team. While Copycat had posed as Domino, the real Domino was being held prisoner by Tolliver for a whole year. After he rescued his original teammate, Cable headed to his space base Greymalkin to reconfigure. He took some time off to remind himself why he traveled back to the past in the first place. Since his arrival, Cable had been sidetracked by the collective struggle of mutant kind. He'd unknowingly devoted himself to creating strike teams to serve this purpose. Death to the Mutant Liberation Front and Charles Xavier. Cable had a brief run-in with MysTech, which was a secret organization run by 7 mages who sold their souls to Mephisto. He fought the Warheads once more. He learned their origin as intergalactic mercenaries employed by MysTech. Cable killed off the entire Malkuth troop, save for their leader, Shay. Could we expect this time-traveling mercenary to relax and wind down in his free time when he's not fighting off bad guys? No. In fact, in his downtime, Cable decided to help the Time Guardians, who are as celestial as they sound. These powerful beings of pure knowledge guarded time itself. Cable was put on a mission to sneak into a rave in order to track a MysTech drug deal. He teamed up with Nick Fury and Bad Hand to infiltrate the organization. While carrying out his mission, the higher-ups at MysTech caught wind of their little plan and set the Harpies on the men. Cable's second tussle with MysTech was when he noticed vast amounts of psionic energy that emerged from their headquarters. He was confronted by a group named the Shadow Riders and fought them before both parties realized that they had a common enemy, MysTech. This three-way battle landed them in a whole different dimension, the Arena world. They had to face a monstrous being named Abandon, which they bravely did, after which Cable managed to return home in one piece. This time, Cable was determined to observe the activities of the Mutant Liberation Front closely. He decided to blend into plain sight and devise sneaky ambushes. For instance, when he waited in line for a museum in Paris, he noticed the MLF on a covert mission to steal a museum artifact, which was a sword. Sumo of the MLF managed to grab the sword, but Cable shot him in the noggin. The robbers fled as it dawned on him. Cable noticed that there were multiple artifacts that were stolen for museums around the world. The remaining 2 artifacts were in Egypt and Japan. Cable ambushed the MLF team the moment they arrived in Japan, but he failed to capture a single person. Instead, he ran a few diagnostics on MLF operations until he was attacked by Garrison Kane. When Cable asked Kane why he'd ambushed him, Kane simply showed him an image of Strife without his helmet. This whole time, the readers knew that Strife might have been Cable's evil clone. But this was the first time Cable learned that one of his archenemies looked exactly like him, which floored him. Anyway, Cable and Kane were able to strike a deal. Cable was set on taking down Strife, now more than ever. Too long had the villainous leader of the MLF meddled with Cable's life and posed as a perpetual threat to peace. Cable and Kane arrived in Japan and rushed to meet the Silver Samurai so he could protect the last remaining artifact. The artifact was said to be an ancestral mask hidden away in Mexico, but the MLF were 2 steps ahead this time, ready for them. Cable and Kane were ambushed by Strife's team, and Cable found himself in a similar situation. He had to choose to either save Kane's life or retrieve a data disk with priceless information from Strife. There was no way he'd do what he'd once cowardly done. Cable nearly died at the hands of Strife, but didn't abandon his ally at any cost. Kane jumped in to rescue him, and the 3 nearly died together. As much as Cable wished to kill Strife once and for all, his body slid Kane into the future and ensured his safety first. Cable left Kane in the future to heal, while he returned to the present in what seemed like a never-ending pursuit of his evil clone. It was a well-known fact that Cable and Charles Xavier shared a similar vision for peace in human-mutant relations. The only conflict in belief was the way the means to the end were achieved. Obviously, Cable was the one who strongly believed that the entire approach should be more aggressive and in your face. Rumors swirled that the man who shot Charles Xavier was infected with the techno-organic virus. This led everyone to believe that Cable was the main suspect. This was during the Executioner storyline, a tale of Strife's masterfully executed revenge on his enemies. In the middle of one of his speeches on mutant-human equality, Xavier was shot in the face with a techno-organic virus slug by Strife. The X-Men and X-Factor began looking for Cable as they believed it was him. They even butt heads with the X-Force, but Cable's team was clueless as to where their leader was. He'd gone off the grid. When these accusations reached Cable, he wanted to clear his name by killing Strife. He headed to Department K to gain more intel on his evil clone, but ran into Wolverine and Bishop. Cable was the man of the hour and mutant they were hunting. After a fierce battle among 3 equally violent mutants, Cable eventually gave in. Bishop wanted to kill him on the spot, but Wolverine gave Cable a chance to explain himself. The trio body slid to Grey Malkin, where Cable's sense of reality slowly turned upside down. They focused on the assassination attempt, the abduction of Scott and Jean, and the possibilities of Strife and Cable being twins or even clones. The 3 men theorized that Strife could either be a clone of Cable or vice versa. They realized that Strife was using Apocalypse as a mask and traced all of the supervillains' hideouts on Earth. Wolverine recalled Apocalypse's lunar base on the moon where Nathan was originally infected. The trio was hurriedly transported to this exact location, and their discoveries related back to Storm. Aurora warned them to wait until the other teams reached, but they paid no mind and were nearly overrun by the Dark Riders. Still, Cable led another mission against Strife when he took Jean Grey and Cyclops to the surface of the moon. Both Cable and Havoc were able to pass through the special force fields that were built as a defensive measure. It turned out that only mutants with the Summer's blood flowing through their veins could pass through these defenses. Cable's body was bombarded with blasts till his synthetic skin melted off. As Strife and Cable fought, Jean created a protective shield around everyone else present. Amidst their tussle, Cable threw a switch to Cyclops and told him to set it off when the time was right. Pressing the switch would mean that Cable would essentially self-detonate and create mountains of time flux energies. Cyclops hit the switch just as Cable self-destructed, and the time flux that followed tore a wormhole around the tower they were in. Everything was sucked in, along with Cable and Strife. Cable had valiantly sacrificed himself and achieved what he'd promised himself he would. Back to the future and meeting Magneto. Following his grand fight with Strife, Cable found himself temporarily displaced through the fabric of time and space. He eventually found his way back into the future and sought out Garrison Kane. He also managed to find a Clan Chosen safe house and help them defend themselves against the Flatliners. Readers were surprised by Cable's appearance during this storyline. He'd grown a goatee, which seemed highly uncharacteristic of him. With the help of the Clan Chosen, Cable broke into the new Canaanite Tynex in Niagara Falls. There lay a time chamber that could be used to send Kane and Cable back to them, and Cable soon realized that they were severely outnumbered. Cable ordered the synth on Boak to fire an electric impulse that would be strong enough to take out all the Flatliners. The synth did this at the cost of his own circuitry, but Cable and Kane were able to reach the time chamber and lock down on the right timeline to travel to. They couldn't transport to Grey Malkin since the X-Force had cleared out the entire base to prevent S.H.I.E.L.D. and Stark Industries from getting their greedy hands on its highly futuristic tech. Readers realized that something was off with Cable. Honestly, the goatee was the first glaring warning sign. sign. As they prepared to leave, Cable linked the time chamber to his personal battery system and answered a few questions that Kane had for him. Cable believed that he could be Strife's clone and couldn't wait to kill Jean and Scott when he returned to the present. The moment the duo arrived at Cable's Switzerland safe house, he was confronted by G.W. Bridge. Bridge was a former mercenary and a high-ranking agent for S.H.I.E.L.D. Bridge informed Cable of what they'd done to his Greymalkin base and the fact that Domino gathered half of the OG six-pack in search of the X-Force. The three rushed to Camp Verde, the latest base for the X-Force. Cable was met with Copycat, who greeted him like an old friend. He refused to reunite the six-pack, presumably because he still felt guilty about how things had ended and felt unworthy to lead them. Instead, he waited for his X-Force team, but the reunion turned out to be quite messy and awkward. It was exciting to witness too, as each member of the X-Force had a different relationship with Cable. But this reunion was cut short when Exodus arrived. Exodus was a powerful mutant from the Crusades and a former follower of Magneto. Exodus brushed off the team and only abducted Cannonball and Sunspot, along with Rusty and Skids. Cannonball had smartly activated a homing device, which led Cable to Greymalkin, which was now Magneto's base. Remember the space station the Master of Magnetism had levitated from the bottom of the ocean? Well, Cable confronted Magneto, but his brute strength was nothing compared to Magneto's cunning powers. The Master of Magnetism ripped Cable's body apart into ribbons. After all, he was made up mostly of organic steel. Cable barely escaped, but had to be hooked onto countless machines, being severely dependent on his X-Force team to remain alive. This near brush with an agonizing death came with a realization. It dawned on him that his leadership caused the team to lose their sense of individualistic identities. He promised himself to train soldiers who were less like him and more like what they were truly capable of. The harsh truth and confronting his father. A mutant named Martin Strong was a traitor to his own kind. He wished to completely eradicate the mutant X gene. Cable devised a plan for Feral to be captured by Strong Industries, while Cannonball and Siren disguised themselves as interns. Cable faced off with Martin Strong and eventually overcame him. He also showed Strong his own true form and the extent of his damaging actions. However, Strong's labs were kept intact and they could be used to help mutants in the future. Cable led a life of putting out one fire after the other. The Mutant Liberation Front wasn't dead. A revamped MLF had abducted Henry Peter Grinch, which prompted Cable to lead his X-Force team on a rescue mission to Bermuda. They managed to free the kidnapped man, but were met with the new leader of the MLF, Rainfire. More than beating each other up, Cable and Rainfire debated the differences in their beliefs and visions for all mutants. To add insult to one of his oldest injuries, Feral left the X-Force team and decided to join the Mutant Liberation Front. On top of that, Sunspot was teleported to a mysterious location, but the time had come for Cable to deal with some personal stuff. In the father and son story arc, Cable was determined to gain a better understanding of his origins. This played into the larger revenge plot exacted by Tyler Dayspring against his father. Tyler revealed to Mr. Sinister that Strife was Cable's clone. Mr. Sinister decided to use this against Cable and even went as far as to tap into a hidden corner of Cable's mind, which stored Strife's essence away. As a result, Cable went berserk until he was convinced to stop seeking revenge against Strife. After he gained control of his own mind, Cable finally decided to confront his father. But before he could, two members of his team, Cannonball and Boom Boom, randomly disappeared. Cable launched an investigation and realized that a group named the Upstarts were on the hunt for the remaining members of the New Mutants. Just for context, the Upstarts were a group of supervillains founded by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. A portal opened into Shinobi Shaw's penthouse, and it revealed the abducted mutants. As the X-Force teleported away, they ran into the New Warriors, and the two teams realized that the Games Master had set up an elaborate contest. Do you know how Cable realized he was a telepath in his present day? It all started with this contest. His own teammates, who were the Game Master's prisoners, were ordered to attack Cable. Cannonball charged towards his leader, but Cable simply jumped on his back. In a strange moment, Cable began to shake, feeling a surge of telepathy rush through him. He had to fight his own instincts that urged him to kill his teammate. Domino was the only one who addressed the strange new revelation that Cable might be a telepath. Cable finally reached the danger room and ran holographic sequences, which showed the events of that fateful day when he was sent into the future by Cyclops. Cable was shocked by his father's lack of emotion as he sent him away. Just then, Cyclops walked into the room and tried to show his son the recordings of him having a hard time dealing with his decision. The two argued that Cable strongly believed that Cyclops dumped him since it was the convenient thing to do, but Scott countered that sending his son into an unknown and possibly risky future was the hardest thing he had to do. The conversation was interrupted by Executioner, but the two men easily overcame the villain. Cable realized that that was the first time he'd fought alongside his own father, and this helped the two men bond. Nathan's confrontation with Scott was essential and long overdue. For most of his life, Nathan had never felt real enough, being displaced through time. Not only was his body marred by a mechanical virus, but his origins were always hidden away in the shadows. For the longest time, he believed that he was an artificially engineered clone of a cruel, cruel man. Viewing the holotapes and talking to his father solidified his own identity. He could now begin tracing the story of his life so far. the wedding, and work-life balance. Following these heavy emotional realizations, Cable found himself on Muir Island talking to his person of comfort, Rachel Gray, aka Earth 616's Rachel Summers. Cable was unsure of attending Jean and Scott's wedding, but ultimately decided to. He also questioned Rachel on her ability to tap into his inner computational thoughts and whether this was related to his own telepathy at all. They were interrupted by Omega Red, the Russian version of Super Soldier. He came under the ruse of looking for a cure for his death spore virus that he was seemingly infected by, but Cable realized his plans of infecting the Earth with the same deadly virus. He decided to team up with the Acolytes to hunt down the Russian mutant. They were led to Magneto's old Arctic base, where Omega Red was set to be, but Cable made a mistake by trusting the Acolytes, who soon turned on him. Their larger plan was to capture Omega Red and release his virus into space. Cable soon discovered that he could control the entire inside of the base they were in. All he had to do was speak and instruct while it listened. With the question of who he truly was partially answered, things began falling into place for this time-traveling mercenary. He also had the chance to undo some of his mother's most damaging actions after he answered the plea for help made by Lee Forrester in the Everglades. The former lover of Magneto and Cyclops was being hunted by a madman named Senyaka. Cable defeated the maniac, but he and Lee found themselves trapped in a hurricane in the Everglades. They sought shelter in a cabin, but didn't know that their welcoming host was despair. The demon made them revisit the most painful memories that they held. This was a true blow to their spirits. After the hurricane blew over, it was revealed to Cable that as a child of Madeline Pryor, he held the power to stop Earth and Limbo from linking. The demon Sim sought to connect the two worlds, but Cable prevented this. Mission after mission, Cable realized that he really needed to bring some work-life balance into the mix. Till now, his life had mostly been working. As an attempt, Cable asked Domino out on a date, but he also forgot that Copycat had posed as Domino for the longest time, so he hardly knew her true personality. The date was clunky and awkward until they were interrupted by Thorn, who begged Cable to bring the Morlocks back. Cable and Domino headed into the Morlocks tunnel and got to work setting it up for the group's return. This wasn't the direction Cable expected his date to go in, but it felt way more familiar and comfortable for both of them. Domino reassured him that she'd had a great time. After this came a threat that feels very real in our world. Artificial intelligence threatened to take over the world. The government had moved forward with an AI project that could lead to the extinction of the mutant kind. Hearing this, Cable jumped into action and led his team to destroy the government-sanctioned prototype of the robot. But they were too late, as this robot named Nimrod activated and instantly went into the offensive. The robot killed relentlessly until Cable was able to get in its head. The telepathic mutant convinced the robot that killing humans and mutants was of no use, since it would have nothing else to live for if its creators were wiped out. This worked, but getting inside a robot's mind temporarily messed with Cable's mechanical body parts. Father of Genesis and the Legion Quest. During the Phalanx Covenant story arc, the Phalanx attempted to take over Earth, and it took the combined might of all the X-teams to stop them. In one instance, Professor Xavier telepathically begged Cable to help the X-Men take down this galactic threat. They led a charge against the aliens on Muir Island, with Cable and Jean taking the telepathic front, while Cyclops and Wolverine led the ground assault. Something about fighting alongside Jean felt oddly familiar to Cable. Had he fought by her side before? Yeah, he had, when the psyches of Jean and Scott were transferred into the future as Red and Slim. They'd fought Apocalypse's forces then. This is why fighting alongside Scott also felt natural to Cable. While Jean and Cable fought the Phalanx on the astral plane, it was clear that Cable was new to the whole telepathy game. His level of being a rookie nearly got him killed, but he was rescued by Wolverine in the nick of time. After the fall of the Phalanx, Cable met up with his X-Force at Camp Verde, where he made a bizarre discovery. Domino's new friend, Prush, was the sentient computer ship transferred into a human body. The computer that lay dormant in Nathan's chest when he was first infected. It went by the name of Professor, and since it found no place with Cable or the X-Force, it flew above to find belonging among the stars. This was the moment where all of Cable's connections to his past had been buried. His time travel base had sunk in the Pacific Ocean, and his life coach plus sentient computer companion was gone, presumably forever. Rumors stirred up about the return of the Morlocks, which led Cable and Storm to check out the tunnels where the group resided. Instead, they were met with the Dark Riders, minions of Apocalypse. Cable had practiced control of his telekinesis and used these powers to make the Dark Riders flee for their lives. Cable, Domino, Caliban and Storm traced the Riders into the deserts of Egypt, where they made a disturbing discovery. Not only was an entire village of Aqaba, where Askani rebels from the future were slaughtered, but the unusual activity of the Dark Riders hinted at the resurrection of Apocalypse. Cable's worst nightmare as a father came true. Tyler was behind the murders and thought himself to be the self-proclaimed heir of Apocalypse. Cable decided to sacrifice himself in order to save his friends. He allowed his son to carry him away to a fortress. Tyler was prepared to suck all the power out of his father so he could ascend as Genesis. In an incredibly vulnerable move, Cable opened himself up entirely, letting his son view the objective truth of his reality. All the false and brainwashed beliefs Tyler held of his father were shattered, which turned his world upside down, something he couldn't handle as he fled. But at least Cable prevented the ascension of Genesis 2.0. This was followed by the Legion Quest storyline, which was a prelude to the alternate reality Age of Apocalypse. Cable's role in this began with being asked to use the time signature that was left behind by Legion, the son of Charles Xavier. He did this in order to travel back in time and find Storm, Iceman, Bishop, and Psylocke. With Xavier and Jean as his anchors, Cable made the trip back to the past and communicated with the concerned X-Men. The Earth was set to end, and Cable spent his last few moments with those he loved. Cable finally kissed Domino. Also, Jean and Scott revealed to him that they were Slim and Red, his parents who raised him for the first 12 years of his life. Soon, the tides turned against the Age of Apocalypse, and the world didn't end. With even more truths being revealed to him, Cable strived to be better at the powers he inherited. He began practicing his telepathy and telekinesis more. Cable even encouraged his teammates to practice their powers and graduated Cannonball into the X-Men team. Cable versus Nathan, and a blast into the past. Tyler decided to send his father a postcard. Cable desperately wished to locate his son and sought Blacksmith's help. Tyler's last known location was Aqaba, where Cable ran into Alia, instead his wife from the future. After she was healed by Blacksmith, Alia requested Cable to save Nathan Dayspring from dying. Cable and Domino made the jump into the future in search of Ship, the computer. Cable retrieved the sentient device from Strife and installed it in his younger self. Of course, in the future, his wife remained dead, but seeing her alive in the past really jarred him, and hardly anyone was worthy to change the course of time and fate. On their way back to the present, Mr. Sinister meddled with their course since Cable and Domino found themselves on the island of Genosha. There was a full-blown rebellion led by Philip Moreau and Jennifer Ransom against the Genosian hierarchy. Cable decided to join in and use his powers for a greater cause. Safe Haven was attacked by the Magistrates, who forced Cable and the team to teleport into the Ridgeback Mountains. There, they ran into the sinister lab of the Sugar Man. Sugar Man was an evil geneticist from the Age of Apocalypse who nearly detonated a nuclear power core. Cable didn't feel the need to lift a finger and simply got in Sugar Man's head to throw him off. Cable really committed himself to using his telepathic powers, like the time when the X-Force was kidnapped and mind-controlled by Lady Tessa. Instead of using brute force, Cable brought his team back to their senses by flooding memories through their minds, memories that reminded them of who they truly were. The timeline created by the Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295, gave us Nate Gray, Cable's counterpart from an alternate universe. When Nate made the jump to Earth 616, his presence messed with the planet's psionic plane. This, in turn, disrupted the powers of telepaths all over the globe. When Cable set off to confront Nate, he experienced what could be described as psionic whiplash. The two engaged in a devastating fight, with Exodus being fed from their electrifying psionic energies. Cable didn't want to fight, he wished to reason. He pushed Nate beyond his limits, and when his younger counterpart passed out, Cable telepathically entered his mind to patch up Nate's broken psyche. Weakening powers while dimension hopping. Tragically, Tyler was killed by Wolverine in one of his berserker rages. Cable harbored no ill will toward anyone involved, as he knew that the path his son chose would ultimately end violently for him. He attended his son's funeral with Domino. After this, they made their way to Camp Hayden to look into Onslaught's presence, which was reported there. In a rare occurrence, Cable lost the battle. This hinted at his powers starting to take a greater strain on him. A more terrifying revelation was that it was harder for Cable to keep his technovirus in check. Down at the Baltimore Docks, he was confronted by Onslaught's herald, Host. Cable was beaten to a pulp, and an attempt to use his powers in the fight left him weaker than ever. It was only thanks to Storm that he was rescued. In the X-Men's fight against Onslaught, Cable only managed to hold out till the end of the battle. When it was over, he collapsed, being completely devoured by his techno-organic virus. He was helped by Franklin Richards. The two men spoke, and Cable realized he was being weighed down by grief. The sorrow in him for his wife and son's death was so profound that it affected his powers. Cable made peace with the purpose he had on this planet and regained control of his abilities once again. Cable was a man who often put up a stoic and impassive front, but given the hurt he's experienced, it's no surprise that it began hindering his powers. Cable also refocused his attention back on the X-Force team and began running background checks. He wished to look into Shatterstar's origins, but the team was attacked and Shatterstar was kidnapped. The kidnappers were traced into the nightmarish dimension of the Mojoverse, where Cable and Shatterstar had their minds wiped out. Cable was forced to feature in Mojo's twisted galactic soap opera. Even the X-Men had once fallen victim to this atrocity, but the hero Longshot teleported them them back to their reality. Once back on our Earth, Cable was notified of a potential breach of his long-forgotten base, Greymalkin. It was an attempt to retrieve the Time Core in order to travel forward in time. The tussle that followed threatened to set off the core, which would potentially wipe out the entire universe and all concepts of time. But Cable instead manually detonated a bomb, which destroyed his time base and the only way to return home, or at least what he considered home. Cable even briefly visited Asgard when Danny Moonstar requested the X-Force's help when the Valkyrie went missing for a while. He had to fight through Odin's trolls and confront Malekith, the leader of the Dark Elves of Svartalfheim. Soldier X and the Messiah Complex. Perhaps one of the most prominent periods in Cable's life was when he found himself with unlimited control over his powers. Here, he was referred to as Soldier X as he used his raw power for the greater good. With the techno-organic virus slackening its hold on his abilities, Cable began by retrieving the pieces of his space station Providence that lay sunken at the bottom of the ocean. He turned this into a flying sanctuary, keeping it afloat using only his mind. He spent days rearranging the water paths to reach the Sahara Desert, getting rid of pesky loggers from the Amazon rainforest, tapping into the mind and body of every single person who suffered from disease and trying to ease their pain. He disrupted nearly 14 terrorist attacks and prevented hundreds of murders and thousands of car accidents. Cable even tried to reverse the effects of AIDS on its patients. While he used his powers to help the world and its people, governments and other bodies of power like S.H.I.E.L.D. felt seriously concerned. Or maybe they just felt threatened because there was a being who could easily wipe them out in the blink of an eye. The X-Men and the Six-Pack were dispatched to take Cable down. Even after the betrayal, the Six-Pack chose to defy their orders and side with their old boss. The nearly omnipotent mutant gave the governments an ultimatum. They had 2 days to get rid of all their weapons of mass destruction, or else he tossed them to the sun. The X-Men, along with Deadpool, relentlessly attacked Cable, but the grizzled veteran was barely affected. Even when the Silver Surfer got involved, the two engaged in a ferocious battle. The cosmic entity was convinced that Cable's passion for making the world a better place, paired with his undiluted power, would surely kill him. One thing Cable ensured was to repair the damage done to cities after every battle, all the while managing to keep his sanctuary afloat. Other superheroes could take some notes. In his power surge, Cable broke clean through the Silver Surfer's board, but this excessive power began to worry him. He asked Deadpool to lobotomize him with the teleporter matrix, which shut down higher brain functioning, such as using his telepathy. Cable went into hiding, and the X-Force seemingly disbanded. Cable went solo until he began pairing up with Deadpool for most missions. This was the beginning of their buddy cop bromance, which so many fans have come to adore today. Then came one of the most monumental events that shaped the history of mutant kind. In the Messiah Complex storyline, the X-Men discovered what could be the only hope for the whole mutant kind, the first mutant born after the events of M-Day. M-Day was the cataclysmic event triggered by the Scarlet Witch, who stripped the powers of over 90% of the mutant population. The baby mutant was considered to be the future of all mutant kind. Cable felt fiercely protective towards the infant and fought relentlessly to take her under his care. He decided that time traveling away was the only way to keep her safe. He arrived in New Jersey in the year 2043 AD and was immediately ambushed by Bishop. Bishop believed that the baby mutant would be the destroyer of their kind instead of saving them. As Cable was about to escape, his father, Cyclops, attempted to stop him. But Cable begged him to see sense in the matter and let the baby grow up in the future where she could be raised as a savior for mutants. Cable and the mutant baby fled to an alternate reality in which Sam Cannonball Guthrie was the only surviving member of the X-Men. Sam found Cable and the baby in this reality through Cerebro. Much to their horror, Bishop also followed them, wholly determined to kill the infant. Sam offered to distract him while Cable and the baby fled, but Bishop killed Sam by ripping out his heart. Cable almost teleported away yet again, but said to himself that he was tired of running. He secured the baby to a metal holster and confronted Bishop. Cable was nearly defeated when he realized what was truly at stake. This wasn't about winning or losing a lousy battle. It was about keeping the baby safe. So he time-traveled once more to avoid death. Cable raised the girl as his own, naming her Hope Summers. When Hope hit her teenage years, the two traveled to Xavier's Institute only to see it destroyed. Meanwhile, Bastion and the Sapien League were also on the hunt for Hope. Because of Nightcrawler's brave sacrifice, Hope was safely transported to Utopia. Despite this, Bastion sealed San Francisco and Utopia in an energy bubble and attacked the mutants trapped inside with his army of Nimrod Sentinels. Cyclops sent Cable and his team into the future to end the production of the Nimrods, which were basically highly advanced sentient Sentinels, as deadly as Sentinels could get. Once the job was done and the production shut down, Cable realized that the time portal back to the present couldn't be held open by organic living beings. It was time for yet another sacrifice, as Cable allowed his techno-organic virus to take over him, leaving him wholly inorganic. He let his team pass through and smiled at Hope, his dear daughter, one last time before crumbling into metallic fragments. Hope Summers had just witnessed her father disintegrate in front of her eyes. The rage and grief of it all triggered her mutant powers to manifest, which she used to annihilate Bastion. He returned to kill the Avengers. It was shown that Cable was alive. He was just launched into the future. His visit to this timeline revealed that it was a barren, dead wasteland, a reality that could have been prevented if Hope had survived. But Cable also had only 24 hours to live before his techno-organic virus completely took over him, which would effectively kill him. He spent his last few hours hunting down those who would supposedly kill Hope Summers. The culprits turned out to be the Avengers. Cable released the Lethal Legion, a group of deadly villains dedicated to destroying the Avengers. At the same time, he took on Captain America and the Red Hulk. He felt his techno-organic virus nearly take over him, but he managed to use it to subdue Red Hulk. When Hope, Cyclops, and Blacksmith showed up, a truce was drawn up between all fighting parties. In Utopia, Hope Summers was able to channel the Phoenix's energy through her. She used this to cure her father Cable of his techno-organic virus forever. The only thing he was left with was atrophied muscles, which were replaced by Forge with shiny new cybernetic components. Cable isn't Cable without his X-Force. The team regrouped and focused on potential threats which Cable perceived through precognitive visions. Old Man Cable explored. During the crossover event known as Extermination, Cable was killed by a masked assassin. This was none other than his younger self. Kid Cable believed that his older counterpart had failed to protect the timeline and severely messed up their future as well. With the dawn of X story arc, the X-Men and most mutants were revitalized and were made to expand their lives on the island of Krakoa. Before the House of X storyline, Cable was also reimagined. He went from grizzled old war veteran to Kid Cable. Kid Cable was known to have a lighter demeanor, untouched by the tragedies of life. He was more fun and hopeful, featuring in his own comic series titled Cable, which was first published in 2020. He was far from the bitterly cynical Cable we're familiar with. Kid Cable killed Old Man Cable as he blamed the aged war veteran for most incidents that went against the favor of mutants. He believed Cable was responsible for most of the tragedies of mutant kind, especially in the 21st century. So, Kid Cable felt that he had to play the role of the jury and executioner himself. Younger Cable was shown to be a confident kid who led a fight team on the island of Krakoa. Old Man Cable was a grizzled veteran destined to save the future, and he will be again. But for this storyline, he's a young mutant living on Krakoa, still proving to be one of the best mutant fighters the island has to offer. Son of two of the most powerful mutants to live, even Kid Cable was fated to lead other mutants in rebellion. Kid Cable led the X-Force, and even in his timeline, he worked hard to prevent the mistakes that his predecessor had made. But the question still remained, was killing Old Man Cable the wisest choice? We see Kid Cable scramble to resurrect the old man pretty soon after. It all started when Krakoa ate a monster island, which meant that the mutants encountered more monsters. One of these beings was a giant alpha dog, which had a metal sword embedded in its paw. Kid Cable pulled it out, but the moment he held the sword, a vision plagued him. The sword was first wielded by a space knight named Morn. The blade was called the Light of Galador and was used to protect the planet of the same name. As soon as the metal of the blade touched Kid Cable's hand, other Galadorian knights were awakened from their slumber. They hunted Kid Cable down in order to retrieve their sword. But younger Nathan wasn't ready to give up the cool new sword he found. The Galadorians and Nathan struck a deal. He would help them travel to the past in time so they could save their planet from being destroyed. In exchange, the Galadorians would let Kid Cable keep the sword. For the Galadorians to time travel, Nathan needed to pay his dead old self a visit, but Old Man Cable's grave was already dug up, which could only mean that the King of Staten Island had paid his old friend a visit to steal his corpse. Kid Cable visited Deadpool and proceeded to rip the cybernetic arm off his old self, but instead of a time-traveling device, Old Man Cable had switched it out for a nuclear detonator. The old man knew that death at the hands of his younger self awaited him. He also knew that Kid Cable would be put in this situation and might need a way out. The Galadorians were blown to bits while Kid Cable escaped through a time portal. Eventually, the younger one realized his recklessness and decided to resurrect Old Man Cable. After all, he needed his older counterpart's help to defeat Strife, who was gathering demonic forces and staging an invasion of Krakoa in some hellish dimension. Kid Cable resurrected Old Man Cable with the help of the Five, a circuit of mutants whose powers, when used together, could resurrect the dead. One of the members of the Five was Hope Summers. She saw her father come to life and the two tightly embraced. It was a touching reunion, but Cable lectured his younger self for being impulsive and making rash decisions that could potentially cause the X-Men a lot of damage. It was odd that Kid Cable believed that he was meant to grow up and protect his timeline. Old Man Cable threw it out there. He'd never known a timeline that he messed with for his own benefit. Old Man Cable showed off a bit and body slid to Grey Malkin 2, his second space station, as they were going to war with their evil clone. Strife was just just about to sacrifice a mutant baby when Old Man Cable ambushed him from the ceiling. The battle began with Old Man Cable making a beeline for his evil clone. Deadpool, Cyclops, and Esme took care of Strife's devilish creatures. Old Man Cable's team seemed outnumbered till the forces of mutants from Krakoa, led by Jean, teleported right onto the battlefield. Jean and Esme telepathically invaded Strife's mind. They found it to be a cruel place, filled with hate. They stole his powers while Old Man Cable and Kid Cable went in for the kill. After the defeat of Strife and his armies, Kid Cable decided to stay on Krakoa while Old Man Cable decided he was done with Earth 616. He joined up with SWORD, a branch of S.H.I.E.L.D. that dealt with extraterrestrial terrorism. The history of alternate reality Cable, exploring diverse dimensions of destiny and power. In the Marvel Universe, our Earth isn't the only reality to exist, especially for a time and dimension hopper like Cable. Similar to Kid Cable, let's explore some alternate reality counterparts of Cable across the multiverse. If Cable and Wolverine had a love child, it'd be the Cable-Logan counterpart of Marvel's Ultimate Universe, aka Earth 1610. In this timeline, Apocalypse had taken over the world. This forced Cable to go back in time and abduct Xavier. He repaired Xavier's legs so he could walk, and he extensively trained him to defeat Apocalypse. When they returned to the present of Earth 1610, Xavier used his training to defeat the supervillain. Somehow, Cable just stopped existing in this universe. We're familiar with Cable's counterpart from Earth 295, the genetically engineered mutant created by Mr. Sinister, Nate Gray. He was an Omega-level mutant who belonged to the Age of Apocalypse timeline. Cable of Earth 616 attempted to fix Nate Gray's broken and brainwashed psyche. Their confrontation on our planet was psionically devastating. Earth 5070 saw a weird purple version of Cable with the common feature of his cybernetic arm. Earth 5701 was yet another realm of nightmares. Apocalypse ruled this Earth with the help of his 4 deadly horsemen. These were Angel as Death, Blob as Famine, Spider-Man as Pestilence, and Cable as War. In this reality, Cable killed his best buddy, Deadpool, and was responsible for the unprecedented genocide of both mutants and humans. What would happen if Cable's techno-organic virus completely took over his body, mind, soul, psyche, and very being? We get a glimpse of this horrific outcome in the Earth 9997 reality. Being devoured by his TO virus, Cable was just a blob of organic liquid metal. His body and mind had turned to metal, yet he remained sentient. In this state, he survived the telepath massacre that managed to kill all living telepaths, including Jean and Xavier. Liquid metal blob Cable hid himself underneath Magneto's Sentinel City to avoid being massacred. In the Earth 90214 timeline, Deadpool and Cable were soldiers in World War II. Present day, Cable worked for the CIA, operating directly under the President. Earth 161 was depicted as a bittersweet reality. Imagine if Cable was never infected by the techno-organic virus as an infant. Would this have given him a shot at a relatively normal childhood? Well, the chances were slim, given the family he was born into. This reality showed Cable as a young boy free of the TO virus. He spent most of his childhood leading a carefree existence, living with his grandparents in Alaska. Earth 1020 was another reality where Cable was completely taken over by the cursed virus, and he was married to Storm. On Earth 1030, Cable led the special government-sanctioned unit of the NYXF, which was responsible for keeping the mutant population in check and preventing overpopulation. Earth 2055 was ruled by Mojo's dark sorceress Spiral. The Cable of this reality defeated the Queen with the help of Shatterstar from Earth 616. The reality of Earth 9939 had been taken over by Baron Strucker VI, who was also behind the deaths of countless superheroes. Cable and the counterpart of X-Force, named the Xaviers, were the last remaining mutant survivors of this world. The surviving Avengers and Xaviers fought valiantly to overthrow the bloodthirsty ruler. On Earth 9922, Cable was part of Team X, which also included Bishop, Deathbird, Longshot, Vertigo, Wolverine, and Dr. Doom. They fought the daughter of Charles Xavier and Lilandra, a mutant named Alana Neramani. Earth 21993 can be considered Cable's villain origin story. His journey till he found the new mutants remained the same in this reality. Following this, Xavier returned from his stay with the Starjammers and found himself appalled at the state of human-mutant relations. But Cable disagreed with Xavier's approach. The mutant militant believed that their kind should strike down enemies and be concerned with their own safety instead of schmoozing with humans. Due to this concerning attitude, Cable was fired from the New Mutants by Charles, but the team refused to abandon their leader. A fight broke out between the New Mutants and the X-Men. In an attempt at damage control, Xavier tried to wipe out Cable's mind in vain. Cable responded by assassinating Xavier, Jean, and Scott. Keep in mind he was unaware that they were his real parents. The uproar that followed split the X-Men into 2 parts. Storm led one team while Wolverine led the other. Aurora wished to punish Cable through the justice system, while Logan managed to hunt Cable and vengefully stab him with his adamantium claws. Earth 32098 was another reality that was created by the Age of Apocalypse. Xavier was the leader of the Skrull movement, while Cable was part of Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He'd also stopped resisting his techno-organic virus and was greatly aged along with the other X-Men. Cable's Earth 58161 counterpart was what he envisioned himself to be, but the reality of Earth 616 turned out differently. Earth 58161 saw Cable as a harbinger of peace. He went by Brother Cable and only existed to bring about world peace. Instead of war, grit, and bloodshed like in other realities, Brother Nathan found a world of adventure by exploring the hidden corners of the human mind and rational thought. Earth 58162 contained a techno-organic virus dominated by Cable. Ironically, the virus itself had discovered its host's vision of world peace. The virus brought this vision to life by taking over the entire planet. The essence of Cable ran through everything on the planet. Earth 58163 was shown during the House of M event. Cable was raised by Mr. Sinister, a genetic farmer. Cable's body was still affected by the TO virus. In the reality of Earth 77995, Jean and Scott had retired as X-Men. They peacefully lived in Alaska with their kids, Nathan and his younger sister Rachel. Nathan was fond of his uncle Xavier, who visited often, but Jean and Scott left their kids in safety while they went to assist the X-Men in their battle against Apocalypse. The battle was won as Apocalypse was killed, but at a great cost, as Xavier also died. After this, Nathan and Rachel attended Xavier's Institute while the parents came out of retirement and rejoined the X-Men. On Earth 95169, Strife won for once and killed off most of the X-Men. The only members who survived were Cable, Bishop, and Wolverine. Earth 97193 saw Wolverine go beyond his berserker age and totally feral. Cable was sanctioned to put the rabid mutant down. Perhaps the saddest alternate reality of them all, Earth 89112. When it began, baby Nathan was sacrificed by his mother, Madeline Pryor, who successfully opened the portal between Earth and Limbo. Inferno was ignited, and demons crawled into our dimension to take over it. Cable's cinematic journey. As a prominent character in the X-Men storylines, Cable isn't restricted to the skillfully illustrated pages of countless comics and graphic novels. He's made a fair share of appearances on screen. He was first seen in the 1992 show X-Men the Animated Series. His first appearance was in the 7th episode titled Slave Island. Initially, he was shown to be free of the TO virus and simply as a mercenary who questioned his allegiance in the mutant world. But Jean Grey sensed in herself that this mercenary was actually her son. It turns out that he knew the truth about his parents and came from a future taken over by Apocalypse. He was a pivotal character in the Beyond Good and Evil storyline and prevented his nightmarish future from occurring. More recently, Cable had appeared in the retcon version of the 90s X-Men show. 2024's X-Men 97 tied up a 31-year-old plotline concerning Cable. The show began with his origin story, which we talked about earlier. Madeline, the Goblin Queen, gave birth to a son Nathan and tried to sacrifice him. The 2024 show addressed a cliffhanger left by the 90s version. In episode 7 of X-Men 97, Scott met with Cable from the future. Everything came rushing back to him as Scott realized that Cable was his son Nathan. It was also alluded that Jean knew this fact all along but chose to keep it from Scott for reasons unknown. Many fans believe that following the first season of X-Men 97, Cable deserves a standalone show of his own. Then we have the hilarious graphic MCU movie Deadpool 2, which hit the big screens in 2018. Cable, played by Josh Brolin, had the same origin story as the comics. The only difference is that his connection to the Cyclops, Jean, and the Goblin Queen wasn't discussed as much. Even in this movie, Cable was a man of tragedy, as his wife and child had been slaughtered by the mutant Fire Fist. So he rushed to the year 2018 to prevent the deaths by hunting down the youth named Russell Collins, who would grow up to become Fire Fist. Cable tried to kill Russell, but the teenager was under the protection of Deadpool, played by Ryan Reynolds. Cable attempted another ambush when Collins was being transported in a prison convoy, but fell into a battle with Deadpool. The Merc with a Mouth also hired Domino, played by Zazie Beetz, who was part of the superhero team, the X-Force. Somehow, Russell managed to escape with Juggernaut. Cable found Deadpool at Blindow's apartment and filled him in on the whole situation and what needed to be done. Deadpool realized he needed to stop the teenager before Russell killed the abusive head of the orphanage he was raised in. In the final showdown, the trio fought Juggernaut. Cable shot at Russell, but Deadpool jumped in the path of the bullet to protect the youth. The catch was Deadpool had a depowering collar on, which meant being shot would not be healed. Russell witnessed how Deadpool sacrificed himself, which led to his vengeful behavior falling away. The timeline rearranged itself, and Cable's wife and daughter were alive. Cable used his time-traveling device to heal Deadpool.
Bishop, and I can't let you do it.
Marvelous verdict. Here we come to the end of Cable's story. Cable was forced to kill his evil clone across timelines for centuries now. The outcome of each battle differed, but one thing that remained constant was death and chaos. Being born in the Summers family often meant war forever. Cable was a man starved of hope because of the life he led. He was a man who lost everything he held dear to him. yet marched on as there was always a villain to fight and a community to be saved. A mutant who had his fate sealed by the parasitic TO virus but still strived to make the world a better place for generations to come. A grizzled warrior who longed for peace but barely had a sliver for himself. If only Cable of Earth 616 was blessed with peace of mind and a slice of paradise as Brother Nathan was. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.